Hi everyone, it's Roger and James here from the What's on Disney Plus podcast. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about what the potential issues could be for Disney Plus if they decided to change their password system to what Netflix has been kind of bringing out this past week. We're also going to be talking about Disney licensing out content to other platforms. Talking about some of the new news from the week, including Visions, Hitmonkey, Ho-Host, and we'll be talking about what we've been watching on Disney Plus recently. But before we go any further, make sure you do hit that subscribe button to keep up with the latest Disney Plus news here on YouTube. You can also subscribe on the audio platforms, find us on the social medias, etc. And obviously, is where you can bookmark us over at What's on Disney Plus. So let's jump into it. So there's been a lot of noise this week with password sharing. Netflix has reportedly, they put up on their website a whole list of new rules that they were bringing in. Now, I want to say this. They've since all this kind of, I would say, as the something hit the fan, they've kind of come out and said, "Oh no, we didn't mean to put the website was for another country in Latin America. It wasn't for the US." I mean, I think it's called just backpedaling as fast as they possibly can. So the thing that they were going to be bringing in was every 30 days you were going to need to sign in. Which I don't think that was a massive problem. One of the other big issues was. If you were going to go on, it was going to be basically connected to your Wi-Fi, to your home Wi-Fi, to your IP address, etc. And if you were going to be leaving that, you needed to get like a PIN code to allow you to have access for like 7 days, which is not good for traveling. Certainly wouldn't be good for those of us here in Europe where we get 6 to 7 weeks annual vacation a year, and we do go away for more than 7 days. I know Americans don't have that, but you know that's kind of quite normal here to go away for 2 weeks. That was one issue. There was another big issue of like students, and if you've got 2 homes, and basically having a full clampdown. Now they've said that they want to do a lot of clamping down on passwords, which I understand from their point of view, from the business point of view. They were probably a little bit too lax, you know, in some ways. They kind of got us used to it too early. And let's all be honest, probably most of us are either using somebody's account or letting somebody else use our account. Because essentially that's what's been the kind of the norm. It's been the norm. Even they tweeted like 6-7 years ago, "Oh, we love sharing passwords." Now that tweet is kind of coming back to bite because it's been retweeted so many times this week. Now the question is we're going to talk a little bit now about what this could mean for Disney Plus. But ultimately, what did you think of the kind of all this kerfuffle that was going on?
Well, I canceled my Netflix account, so.
Oh, that's
and the thing is, I didn't even share my account with anybody. It was literally just my account. There was nobody on it. I think for like 13 or 14 years, there hasn't been anybody else on the account except me. But it's indicative of bigger issues at Netflix, and obviously we've had some things coming up in the past year or so, just in general, where people have talked more about how they can't keep a television series going for more than 3 seasons, often less than that. And people kind of wising up to, well, I shouldn't get attached to any Netflix shows and stuff. And this for me was the final straw. It's like, this is a company that is kind of, they're not struggling because they're still making decent money, but in the modern stock market economy, things like that, it's not good enough to just make money. You have to make more money every single quarter. This is something that comes up with Disney quite frequently as well. And I was just like, I'm not playing this game anymore. There's so many services out there right now. There's so much content that's worth it. If I miss like 1 or 2 shows on Netflix, I'm like, I really would have liked to see that show. It doesn't matter. There's content on other platforms that I'll watch instead. And that's true for any of the platforms. If I suddenly dropped even Disney Plus right now, just like, yeah, I'm not getting The Mandalorian anymore, but I'm watching this over on Paramount Plus or one of the other, or Hulu or something like that. There's just so much good content, not just video, but reading, video games, etc. Cutting myself up from one source of the content really doesn't mean much. And I was just like, nah, it's time. Netflix has. They still have good content. They still got things like Stranger Things and Squid Games and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I've still got Netflix. I'll be honest. If my wife wasn't watching stuff on it, I would get rid of it. I'd probably just jump in and out for a month or two, like when something big hits, like Stranger Things or The Crown or something. But generally, I don't watch a lot on Netflix. Actually, this past week, I've ended up canceling Xbox Game Pass because I sat there. I don't think I've actually fired my Xbox up for 2 months. I've been playing PlayStation Plus because I did a year, and I ended up just kind of like chucking in EA access for like 19 quid to get access to like the Madden games and the sports games that I like to play. And I was like, well, it makes like there's no point having both because I'm just not using them. So I go to that one. Amazon Prime, I'm very close to like now with the holidays over, I'm not really having stuff delivered. We started watching The Rig, but that's the first thing I've watched on there probably since the Top Gear show. That's I just don't watch enough on there. So I'm thinking, so as far as Netflix goes, I'm on like the next basic tier. I mean, it's literally the ad tiers that, you know, I'm still watching in SD. It's like 6 quid a month or whatever it is. Because I just like, I don't watch enough on it to make it worth it. And this whole thing with the sharing password situation for me is more of if they're trying, I feel like this whole thing of them backtracking with like say, oh, it was a mistake, and we like, well, you really let like the amount of bad publicity that you have had from this thing, and there was a whole host of stuff here technical wise where you just kind of question, what are you doing? Like, I understand letting you log in every 30 days. If you want to like weasel out people using fake, you know, because you can, you know, go onto the dark web and, you know, if you always, you got your, you know, your ex-cousins or your ex-girlfriend's dad's cousin that's still using the account, you know, maybe after 30 days, it like logs them off because you've forgotten all about it. And then they've got a message, you got the password. No, get off. You know, I get that. Being on a different IP address, it's like, whoa, hold on a minute. That doesn't work. You know, you might not even have a standard IP address. You might be using 5G at home. You might not even have home internet. So your internet address is going to change frequently. You could be using a VPN, and you could be using a VPN for security issues or things, not necessarily, you know, for anything funny. And it's like, you know, there's a whole host of different things. You might be on your phone here, and you're on the bus, and then you're on 4G, or you've gone to your friends, or your maybe your parents have split up, and you've gone over. And it was a little bit like, whoa, this is really going in just like too much. I think cutting back a little bit on prompting people for codes and stuff regularly, and having maybe a 30-day or a 45-day clock in and out on some devices. I don't think that's a problem, but these rules. I mean, I think they've I think they've been backtracking and saying it's a mistake, and they didn't. Well, you've been doing this in other countries, and basically people have reacted really badly to it.
I wonder if this is the same situation that we saw with Wizards of the Coast recently, the makers of Dungeons and Dragons, which some people may be familiar with, where that had a lot of backlash, where they changed some of the rules. I've got no idea. I'm not clear on the specifics. I just know there was a big thing. They changed some rules about creator content, people making videos and people making their own, what do they call them? Modules for the game, things like that. And it got leaked, quote unquote. And the backlash was immense, just like it was here with Netflix. And then they're like, oh, we modified it. We took your advice and we gave you this other one now. And it's still like, no, this is still terrible. It's not as terrible, but it's still terrible. And as far as I know, they've walked it back completely. And actually, it's less restrictive than it was when they first started because the backlash was just so bad. And this is a corporate tactic that you see every once in a while where they're like, we accidentally let you see the really bad one so that when we release the less bad one, you're like, well, at least it's not the really, really bad one. And this does work a lot of the time, but I think consumers are wising up to it a lot more than they used to be.
Yeah. I feel like with this stuff as well, is there was a lot of issues with these rules where you almost could see like this was an inconvenience to a subscriber, not even just the fact of it, you know, it's like, oh, you know, Uncle Bob's using your account or something like that. It was like, no, this is going to, you know, like if you're a kid, I like that. It's like going to college, you know, in one way, it's like you are an adult, you've gone off to college and you are now living in another, you've moved out. And I know like people are like, no, they're still at home. Like, well, no, you're an adult and you've moved out the house. So I can see from like the idea of going, well, no, they technically should have their own account because they're an adult and you know, in their own name and they're not living at home anymore. It's like, okay. And then you've got maybe the example of, you know, you've got kids and they're going between the mum and dad or the mum and mum or whatever. And you can kind of go, well, each household could have its own account, but the kids going over, it's like, you know, they're still part. It's like, but we're really getting into like real, like, is this really what you want to be doing? Do you really want to be focusing on this? This isn't where you want to be focusing. You want to be focusing on people selling off accounts on lots of different platforms. Maybe limit, if you want to really start limiting it, maybe let's start limiting the amount of simultaneous logins at once. You know, that could be a way of doing it instead of having like 7 or 8 on the I think that's because we're on a really small plan, so we don't have as many. You know, that might be an issue. You know, if it's like I get where they were coming from, but some of this was really impending on like what I would call family life, where it was like, this is just an inconvenience to the customer, and you're going to just annoy them with these rules. I'm all for like making, like I said, I could quite happily, you know, if every month or 2 months my device said, "Are you still logged in on this?" Okay, I can live with that. But I think, you know, and the idea of maybe trying to get people out in some way, trying to get people out of this idea that password sharing is acceptable, because it's kind of like this like weird thing like, oh yeah, it's perfectly fine. Well, it's not hurting anyone. Well, it's hurting the businesses in terms of doing it. But they've kind of there's a line, and I feel like this one really kind of went way over the top. Now, since I put this on the kind of the agenda for this week's episode, as I said, they've pulled it back. Now, originally, what I kind of want to say is, how could this impact on Disney Plus? And my view on this was like, if this worked, Disney and other streaming services would then start to look at it. And that was my key worry, was Disney might be looking at this now going, we're going to just maybe stay away from this for a time being, because this is a little bit of a hot potato. But if some of this aspects worked, it could drastically impact on all streaming services.
Absolutely. There's no question that there were a lot of companies, Disney included, that were watching Netflix and going, all right, let's see how this plays out. And then, 6 months from now, 9 months from now, well, we've noticed that there's a lot of password sharing on Disney Plus. You're going to either have to upgrade to this tier that has lets you have it 3 devices across multiple households, or we're going to implement something similar to what Netflix did. And we can see this in the past. Like, I would argue that ad tier is kind of similar to that. A lot of the companies have started implementing ad tiers to the streaming packages, and then you could even go back with other industries too, where like Apple, they got rid of the headphone jack on the phones, and all the other companies like, haha, look at that, no headphone jack on the Apples, and then slowly they're taking them away too. It's just the one company, in this case Netflix, that kind of gets the ball rolling, takes the brunt of the consumer feedback and so on, and then other companies going, well, they're doing fine, we'll implement it now. And it's important to note also that it's not necessarily the social media feedback, because people have kind of realized that an outrage on Twitter doesn't necessarily translate into outrage in real life, right? So the real question will be, a few months from now, what does Netflix look like? Will they see a massive drop in subscribers, or will it be there like a little dip and then just kind of levels out again? Because if that's what happens, other companies are like, oh, okay, we could take a little tiny bit of a dip and then level out, and we could still see this implemented. So even though Twitter and Reddit and all this are flipping out.
Even I saw the amount of TikToks I've seen, and that's kind of like, that was when I was like going, hold on, there's like one, I think maybe because I watched one, the algorithm then switched to showing me hundreds of Netflix, and it was like, so I stopped. There was no more puppies for a while. It was now Netflix stuff. It's it's very much that kind of thing of it. The big thing of, it's like, I mean, I look, you look at like your family and situation and stuff of like, certain family members that use streaming services, if they weren't using somebody else's account, they wouldn't even bother. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't. Other ones, I mean, I know my dad would be well and truly upset if I took away his Disney Plus, because he watches loads on it. Would they pay for it? I don't know. it's tricky because it's 8-10 quid a month, and obviously money's limited right now for most people, and for a lot of people, people are starting to cut corners. And one of the things that people have been doing is, you get Disney Plus, I'll get Paramount Plus, and we'll swap. And you both, that's been a common thing. You get a family, one does Netflix, one does Amazon, one does Disney Plus, one does Paramount Plus, and you all share. It kind of makes sense financially, if you've got a few people that, I know the companies don't want you to do it, but it's kind of becomes normal.
Right. And the companies definitely don't want you to do it because, yeah, it's a valid point. Like, let's say I'm sharing my Disney Plus with my mom, and my mom is sharing her Netflix with me. Netflix and Disney Plus are not really getting much benefit out of that. Them having to stream it to 2 different locations, but only getting paid for one, things like that. It's a very small thing, but it adds up at scale when you're talking about millions of people. So I totally get where they're coming from with that. They want both my mom and myself to have the Disney Plus account. And if that password stops working and it's only my account now, they're really not losing anything, even if my mom doesn't subscribe on her own, because now they don't have to stream to multiple locations, which is cost savings for them. But I think go ahead.
I was going to add, the only side issue to that is if you're on an ad tier. See, on the ad tier, it kind of shifts a little bit, because if you're all watching, if you've got you both watching, they are making money off of both of you at this point with the ads, because you're watching more and getting served more adverts. So there is maybe a counter argument that the ad tier kind of benefits them to do this.
I would suggest, though, that the ad tier more offsets their costs rather than generates profit, because the amount of money that you get per ad view, so one ad view, I watch an ad and that's it, is not even calculable. It's there's so many zeros in front of the one with a decimal in front of it that, like, me as an individual contributor on ads doesn't add up. Again, it's at scale when you have millions of people doing it. So I don't know if someone who has my password is watching something even offsets the cost of streaming it to them. I would assume that they have that factored in and that it would, but yeah, it's going to be such an infinitesimal difference between the two that I doubt it really plays too much into it. But that is true. They do get some recouped if we're both watching the ads.
I mean, one thing I really hope that they don't ever do, and is 2-factor authentication for every time you fire up the app, because I have to do this on a screener app, and it's extremely, you got to put the password in, you got to put the username, you're then going to get text and go to a different number, get a thing, get it text you, and it's just, and you have to do it on your phone, and you got to link up to your, and it's just a pain in the butt. So I don't want us going down that line too much, but I don't think it's a problem to have, like I said, maybe every 30 to 60 days you get prompted to log in, or you get asked for a code to log in, because that way you can kind of wean out the people that have maybe sold the accounts, and maybe as well, I mean, there's a whole thing of like targeted, like, well, okay, so this person is streaming here in like Lima and in Beijing and in Sydney at the same time. Something's a little bit off on this, but if you are within, a city or it's always, and even then you might be like, the computer could kind of go, well, it's always streaming from these 2 locations. It's always from these 2 locations constantly. Then you'd be like, okay, well, that's not showing up as a little bit funny. It's always a bit tricky. It's always a little bit tricky, but I'm definitely thinking Disney would have watched this last week, laughed a little bit, and been like, yeah, we might not want to try that just yet.
Well, I honestly, non-maliciously, I'm hoping they're laughing, because that would be the good, like, haha, let's not do that. And as opposed to people in the C-suite or the corporate executives going, yes, it's not going great, but let's see what it looks like 6 months from now, and kind of calculating how they could save. Because if they're laughing, that's good. If they're not laughing, the rest of us should be a bit worried about it.
And I've kind of got this view now of, like, Chapek sat in a chair.
Just wait. I mean, You don't get to do it. You don't get to be a CEO without mastering your evil laugh. I don't think, you know.
And I have started watching Succession, so I've been getting into and The Apprentice as well. So I've been having like a bit of one of those things this week. Right, so that's enough about passwords. Let's now talk about another thing. So Bloomberg last night did an article where they kind of reported that Disney are investigating and looking into licensing its content out. They're in private talks. Nothing official. We're hoping we might get a little bit of clarification maybe from Disney next week. There's a quarterly investors call next week, which will be the first time like Bob's kind of going to go in front of Wall Street and kind of go, this is what we're doing. This is so it's been a bit quiet the last 6-8 weeks. And it was kind of funny seeing the reaction to this because the first there was some people like panicking about the fact that Disney Plus is closing. Like they're selling everything back to Netflix. It's like, no, that's not really what that was. And then they're like, oh, they're going to take stuff off Disney Plus. Like, we don't know anything. And the simple thing is, the studios as a whole are looking right now at trying to make money from its content. They are the concept of going all in on streaming isn't profitable. And they've essentially, I would say the pandemic speeded things up like 10 years. It just gave them a boost and they've had a massive boost. And that's like, oh, it's not, when we take Hocus Pocus 2 and put it straight onto Disney Plus, they didn't make any money. They might have made some subscriptions, but they would have, if they put it in cinemas, they would have made 30, 40, 50, $100 million on it. And then if they sold it on Blu-ray and 4K and rented it out, they would have made some money. Then if they licensed it to Netflix, they would have got some money. And if they licensed it to television networks and stuff, over the case of 6 to 10 years, they would have made money off that film. I remember there's a great video with Matt Damon talking about how they don't make a lot of comedies and stuff now because essentially all those extra markets have kind of dried up. And so if it's not making money at the cinema, that's kind of the end of it. So apparently Disney's new release schedule is packed with theatrical films. We're going to be seeing a lot less streaming films because, why not? I mean, it's like with a lot of like the Hulu ones and the Star originals, it would make more sense just to put them in cinemas and make 10, 20 million on them and then put them on streaming. So there's that aspect. So the idea of selling them on to, HBO did this recently. The Warner Brothers have done it with selling, like taking Westworld off and putting it on to, I think it's Tubi or Roku or something like that. And I think there's that worry of like people, they're going to take off the Avengers and they're going to put it onto like Roku. It's like probably not going to take away the things that are really popular. And if they were to license stuff out, it might be non-exclusive. They might be able to go there and be on there. They did a recent deal with Amazon where a load of shows, I suspect is, like last week, they announced a new deal with a distribution company for releasing 20th century ABC Hollywood record stuff on DVD and it's like, yeah, they're getting back into the idea of going back to some windows. They're trying to get some money in for films. Ultimately, I think for us, the consumer, it's better for us if more movies are making more money, they will make more movies. If they stop making money, they will stop making, and we're only going to end up with Avengers and Avatar movies kind of thing. So there's this kind of like, there was this like instant reactions like, and this is the key thing, Disney are already doing this here, like literally before we came on to record this. Fantastic Mr. Fox was showing on Channel 4. On the BBC, they show like movies all the time. Some shows are airing, is it Modern Family? I know in Australia and in Italy as well. I had some tweets this morning from followers, talking about, how shows air on their countries, but they're still on Disney Plus. And I think it's more just this idea of Disney and other studios of going, we're going to sell to, if you want to like rent some stuff off of us, we're going to kind of let you have it for a bit. What did you think of all this?
Honestly, I think it's a bit overblown. This is just kind of standard business cycle kind of things. Disney in particular has always been susceptible to the grass is greener kind of issues. We've seen it plenty of times with them. We will see it plenty of times more where they're like, all right, and not just them specifically. I think almost every major company that deals in content in some way has this at some point where it's, oh man, we're losing so much money by licensing the stuff to Netflix. They're taking their X amount of cut, let's say 20%. I don't know what it really is, but for the sake of argument, 20% cut. We would get so much more money if we had our own platform and we put the stuff on there. And then, of course, you build the platform and like, oh, man, it's really expensive to run the platform. Let's see if maybe let's divest some of the assets and see if Netflix wants some of our stuff or HBO Max wants some of our stuff. They have done this constantly. We've seen it with the video games too, where like we're gonna do everything in-house, and you get like Disney Infinity and so on. And like, oh man, we get all the benefit, but we also get all the risk. So now we're gonna license it out to EA and we're gonna license it out to these guys. And it's always constantly going on, which is why I'm just kind of like, oh, we're at this point of the phase now. And of course the other part of it too, as you mentioned, is I don't think they'll be doing exclusive licenses. It's not going to be The Mandalorian is now on HBO Max and it's the only place to see it. If it ends up on another one, it's on Disney Plus, but we know you might not have Disney Plus. So we license it out and Netflix will have it for a couple of months and you can watch it over there. We hope you enjoy your Netflix sub and they get their chunk of the money. The one thing I will argue is that, when you're talking about these movies in particular, it's not that they're not making money on Disney Plus. It's just hard to tell what the money is that they're making. Because how do you translate me watching Hocus Pocus 2? How does that translate into money? Obviously, it's not $20 worth unless it is literally the only thing I watched that month on Disney Plus, in which case I paid whatever my subscription fee for Disney Plus is. That's how much that made. But if I'm watching 6 movies a month and I'm watching 3 television series, then the cost goes down per item, right? So how do you calculate that per person? Because everyone's going to have a different amount. Some people are watching 2 things. Some people are watching everything that's coming out. So what's the cost? And this is problematic. And it's much nicer to just go, well, we licensed it to Netflix and they paid us $500,000. That's $500,000 that we made, period, right?
Yeah.
Versus so on and so forth. But they have people who are much more well-versed in that than we are. And I'm sure they've got the numbers and they know what it comes out to.
I was just to add on that because like one thing that's very noticeable is when they obviously release a film and then it gets put in cinemas and then it comes to streaming later. Quite often when you actually look at the minutes watched on like the Nielsen chart, it's still very high. You know, like Wakanda Forever this week will still probably be the #1 film of the week. The Menu recently debuted on HBO Max in the US. I think it was the 3rd most popular film of the week. You know, there's still, it might not be as, it might be a little bit less, you know, I think like Turning Red or something like that was like 250, or it was a lot. But in reality, had it gone to cinemas, how much less does it come down? Because I think they're finding that as well, is like a cinema release on Disney Plus, it's pulling in almost the same amount of minutes. So it's not actually essentially at that point really making a huge difference even more, because it's like, well, the same amount of people are watching it and we've made this amount of money over here. And it's
we've got the people who pay for tickets and we've got the people who stream it, and we get to have both of our cakes and eat both of them, to butcher that particular one. We see this also, you mentioned Game Pass for Xbox recently. I'm assuming it's also true for Sony, though they haven't talked about it. A lot of the games that come onto Game Pass end up seeing a commercial increase as well, because you would think that's the opposite. I can play it on Game Pass. I don't have to buy the game. But what has happened for a lot of developers is we put it on Game Pass, which creates word of mouth, which creates people wanting to go out and get it or support it in some way. And so they're getting the Game Pass money, and then they're also getting people buying the product who might not have otherwise because they didn't know it was out. Obviously, we're talking more like indie developers than the big AAAs, but same idea.
Yeah, and also quite interesting with that recently that there's been a lot of issues with following the Fortnite model of this live. Say, you know, the Avengers game recently has been announced to be closing out, where they were chasing that model to try and make money, and it doesn't work. And it's kind of this weird thing of like every business has been, you know, there's these disruptions that come through and change the rules, but when everyone follows those rules, it just doesn't work the same way. And I feel streaming, you know, we've seen it with Warner Brothers. They're making it. I think Paramount are going to be doing the same. The Netflix model alone is not a winner. And I think they were following that as like, that's the only way of doing it. It's like now we're really starting to see more of a hybrid. I think we're going to see more theatrical releases. We're going to see film. I think they're going to take a little bit longer to get to Disney Plus. I think they're going to stay in cinemas longer. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they followed the Comcast route of having digital release for a couple of weeks. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we saw that, with like Avatar being a big one, of just like, yeah, we're going to put it out here for like a month or two and then bring it to, because you got to remember, way back before the pandemic, we were looking between 6 and 9 months from a cinema release to Disney Plus. So even if it arrived at 90 days or 120 days, it's still far faster than it was before. But I think 45 days, I don't think that's going to carry on much longer.
Yeah, we've talked about it in the past, and with things kind of going back to pre-COVID levels, at least in the States, we're not going to debate whether they should be or not, but with things kind of returning back to that, I could see them extending that window out again. But will it go to 9 months? Probably not. I think 180 might be the max. But keeping on that mind and kind of shifting just a little bit here, the one other thing to keep in mind with this is, we're talking about put the movies in theaters, and then on that presumes that every movie will make a profit at theaters, and that's not true, especially when we're talking about the smaller ones, because it does seem like consumer confidence in the non-huge ones, so not Avatar, not Black Panther, and so on, just isn't there. So if they had released, let's say, The Menu in theater, well, they did, but it didn't do massively well in theaters. The Agatha Christie movie did not do well in theaters, and it will be a while before consumers are willing to go back to the theaters for these smaller releases. And it's weird saying smaller releases. There was a lot of star power in those movies. They're not exactly cheap movies. They're not exactly like art house indies.
So
they're not the Avengers.
I'm just going to drop in here. So just for example, The Menu. So this film worldwide brought in just under $80 million. In the US, it's 38 million, and domestic and international, it was 40. So $80 million with an opening of 9 million. So I just want to see that. I don't think. Let's see what 30 million was the budget.
Yeah.
So that movie essentially is made probably 20 to 30 million. Because you normally double it, don't you, for like with the box office cut, because the cinemas take a cut as well.
Everyone takes a cut,
So they made probably 10 to 20, 30 million dollars on The Menu just on box office alone, and that instantly then that movie is financially a massive success, because it's brought back, it's in terms of the budget to what it's not like Avatar where it was like 200, 300 billion or 200, 300 million. That's a lot. I'd like, so the budget, so that has to take much more to make it, these smaller films with smaller budgets, because $30 million is not a huge budget. I think if I remember rightly, like Togo or something like that was, I think Togo was around the same. So Togo's budget was 40 million. So yeah, Togo was $10 million more, and that never made a penny at the box office.
Right, because it was never released.
Yeah.
But again, this is a question of scale. So for you and I, $10 million is huge. I mean, I would retire. $10 is huge. Yeah. $10 million. If
My wife came home the other day because I found a tenner.
I mean, yeah, $10 is a big deal. But we're talking about companies that deal with billions and billions of dollars. So I'm not going to take that away from The Menu. I'm actually not willing to say it made a profit on it, because there's a lot of expenses that don't get covered in the budget, particularly marketing. It probably made a profit. It might not have.
Yeah.
Still, it also depends on how you cook the books as well, as we've seen plenty of times in the past. But 10 million to Disney versus 10 million to any of the other companies, not any of them, but many of the other studios, is like, it's a bit of a difference. And they're going to be looking at that too. It made profit, but is it worth continuing to make these movies and putting them in theaters when we could be making like Avatar money and getting those in theaters?
I also kind of look at it more like, in some way, it's, if you put out 10 movies, you've got 10 chances of making, because you can easily make a big blockbuster like John Carter, and it's like, at which point you could have released 10 smaller films for the same amount of money. So, and I love the fact now that Disney have like Searchlight in there with 20th Century to kind of give us some different kind of movies. And I love that. Some of the best films I've watched, at least recently, have been from them. Disney kind of got out of the habit of releasing a lot of smaller films in cinemas. Something like Rise is a prime example. That could have, it wouldn't have made a lot at the box office, but it could have done something. It could have at least crawled back. And then when it arrived on Disney Plus, would have been seen. The trouble is, we kind of have this weird fascination now where it's like, if it doesn't make money at the box office, it's awful and it's a dud and it's a bomb, and therefore we shouldn't watch it. And sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean it's not good. It's just people didn't go see it.
Right. And that's the difference between, say, the creative and consumer mentality and the business mentality. Because you can make one of the greatest movies of all time, but if it doesn't make money at the box office, they're going to assume that it's bad. And this is why we hear conversations about like, Westerns don't make money anymore. It's because like you have Westerns that make a ton of money, and then of course there are copycats and quick turnarounds, and they stop making money. And that's one of the things. And you can do this with any genre. The consistent talk about superhero fatigue is, well, they keep making superhero movies, and not just Disney, but HBO and then other companies also make them as well. And like, oh, well, eventually consumers are going to get tired of it. And it doesn't matter if the quality is good. They're just not going to watch super. And it's like, no, that doesn't really bear out. But the business sense and the creative sense are two different things.
Yes, it's all going to be interesting how all this moves on, but we'd love to know what you think of all of this. Let us know in the comments below. Get in touch with us on social media. We're just going to jump into some quick bits of news regarding Disney Plus. So this past week, they announced that Star Wars Visions Volume 2 will be dropping onto Disney Plus on Star Wars Day on May the 4th. Which is a Thursday. 9 new shorts. It's going to be a little bit different this time around because they're from studios around the world. So we've got Spain, the UK, South Korea, France, India, Japan, South Africa, Chile. You've also got the United States. I just love the fact that Aardman is making one, so I can't wait for Wallace and Gromit, with the lightsabers and stuff. So
honestly, that sounds amazing. I would love to watch that.
I like I said, I'd love them to do some like little references to cheese. You have some Wensleydale or something like that in there. Or he puts the wrong trousers on or something like that. Just Darth Vader with wrong trousers on. But it's I thought this was interesting. It's good that they've kind of got it out there. It's kind of set, in some ways, it's set the expectation, I think, for Star Wars Day a little bit now, because we might get an Andor making of or a Mandalorian making of, but this is pretty much it for Star Wars Day, I'd imagine.
Yeah, we'll see. They might have another small thing or two. They've kind of run out of things like, oh, you've been waiting for the release of this, and now we're bringing they might release some other pieces of the holiday special, because right now there's only a little bit. But honestly, I don't think anyone would be too super excited, except as like a meme for it. But I'm glad that they expanded this out to the rest of the world as well. As much fun as it was to have the anime with Vision Season 1, it'll be nice to have a different array of perspectives. This is what we talked about that time, was, let people bring their own influence into the story and see how it changes and see, what the differences are. And frankly, I find it fascinating. So I'm really looking forward to seeing these.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun, I think, just to have a completely different take. And in some ways, what Visions doesn't have to be just anime. I mean, I would like them to do something with anime. They've been picking up a lot of anime shows recently in Japan. But yeah, a little bit more variety, a little bit more spice. Make Visions a little bit different. I think it's good. I definitely feel Star Wars Celebrations coming up for Easter. I suspect we'll find out a little bit more about this one here. I think it sets the tone. Ahsoka's not going to be coming that day because the Mandalorian would have only just ended. Yeah, so I think this was kind of quite a good way of kind of getting this out there and being just sort of, I would almost say, like setting the mark there of what to expect, because the trouble is with Star Wars Day is the fans love it more than Disney and Lucasfilm do. They kind of like, we'll release some merch and we'll put some bits on there, but we don't really plan our entire, the only time we released a movie around this one, it didn't work. Was it Star Wars Day?
But again,
Solo was.
Yeah, it was Solo. But this again goes back to that conversation we were just having, where it's like, oh, Solo did terrible. Nobody wants these movies. It's like, Yeah, well, you marketed it terribly. No one knew what the movie was about, and it's literally only 5 months after I think it was Last Jedi,
Yeah.
which was, let's
Tanked.
just say, controversial. Let's just say controversial, rather than going into another rant about that bloody movie. And of course, corporate just sees Solo didn't hit our projections, and they don't really understand the why. So yeah, they look at it, we launched this movie on Star Wars Day and it didn't go, so let's not do that again, rather than going, well, there were a lot of factors involved, and maybe it wasn't that it was in May, but these other things. Also, I would suspect over the last couple of years, obviously, we've had the COVID pandemic, so the merchandise sales, which is normally what drives May the 5th and so on, or May the 4th, sorry.
Yeah, Revenge of the 5th.
Yeah, Revenge of the 5th, sorry. I'll turn in my Star Wars license right now. May the 4th. The merchandise sales have obviously been down, and that's really what drives Disney, of course, is merchandise. As Yogurt would have said, merchandise.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this one. It should be a lot of fun. Hopefully we find out a little bit. I'm going to be at Star Wars Celebration because it's here in the UK, so I've got my ticket, so I'm ready to roll. So it should be a lot of fun. With the Mandalorian, I think the season finale will only be like 2 weeks away at that point. I suspect we might see some other bits and pieces, but Star Wars is going to start revving up for Celebration pretty soon. Having just seen the prices of what they're doing for the photo opportunities, it's like you might need a mortgage to get, it's like 250 odd bucks, I think it is, to go see Anakin's Hayden Christian. And like, oh yeah, okay. It's like, nope.
Well,
I'll take it. I know what I did last time. It's like if I see them, that's enough for me. It's like see them through a crack and I got a picture. Because they hide them away, so you can't do it.
Of course. But I'm always curious how much of that goes to the actors and how much of it is like taken by the venue and things like that, especially when it's a venue like this.
I know there's been a lot of actors and stuff. It recently happened, I think, with the Stranger Things, or Eddie from Stranger Things, where they sew too many and they literally like working them like a dog, just like to get through them all and stuff. And it was like going, well, who's and it's a bit tricky. I've never done it. I might treat myself to one, but it has to be someone like really good. But I've never ever done one of those things.
Yeah, it always strikes me as one of those like. The business mentality, if the short-term profit is more important than the long-term, because I'd have to assume that that actor, and I've heard of other actors having the same thing where it's oversold, and they're there until like 1 o'clock in the morning greeting everybody who bought a ticket. You'd have to assume they're never coming back to that convention, because I wouldn't.
No, I think I've been reading like maybe Mark Hamill had that problem.
I would not,
because I remember seeing Mark Hamill at the last London Star Wars Celebration because he did a presentation. Loved it, but yeah, I still can't quite get my head around some of the costs, but nevertheless, also this past week it's been revealed that the King of the Hill is getting a reboot. It's going to be coming to Hulu in the US. It'll obviously be a Star International everywhere else on Disney Plus. Some of the actors, most of them are coming about. It's kind of been this weird one of like, I've sort of said it's a reboot, and people go, that's a revival. It's like the press release says a reboot, and then but it's like it's going to be set today. Did you ever watch King of the Hill?
I watched it a bit back in the day. It didn't grab me like the way The Simpsons or Futurama did, so I didn't watch it too much. But obviously, I saw it here and there. Even without the emotional attachment to it or the nostalgia factor, I'm kind of like, why reboot? Just do it as a continuation. Have them do whatever. But we'll have to wait and see what the actual plot is. Is it going to be just we picked the characters up and as they were and drop them here and then update as necessary? Or is it, they've aged 20 years or something?
I think it's just like rebooting it in modern times, and it's just all I can imagine it's just going to be is just Hank just reacting to everything in modern life and just not getting it, and that's basically and then kind of with Bobby and stuff, and just trying to get him on track to the 21st century. That's kind of where I'm feeling like this might go, because that kind of feels like the obvious place to go to.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what they're planning to do with it. Because on the one hand, you could definitely see, Hank, going like down some really crazy paths, like other other people have, but it doesn't fit with his story arc either.
Yeah.
So I don't know how he fits into a modern storytelling.
No.
That said, the fact that they got the cast back and that they're not recasting these does actually give me a little bit of hope that there's authenticity to it.
I think the actress that played Peggy might have died. I don't know off the top of my head, but there might be some issues that they might have had to done like that. Speaking of revivals, they're also bringing back Hitmonkey for a second season. This one came out of nowhere because I mean, it's been over a year since it released. It was like the last Marvel television show. We thought this was a long gone, and yeah, it's coming back. 20th Television are doing the animation for it. It's kind of lost the Marvel branding on the, and everyone was like, they're taking away the Marvel. And then Marvel put up a story and a social media post. Like, well, they're not. This is connecting it that much because they're just taking the Marvel logo off of it. I didn't bother with. I think I watched one episode and that was about it. It was kind of one of those things that they delayed it coming out here in the UK, and by the time it come out, it's pretty much been the cancelled. So I was like, it's a bit like Kindred had been cancelled. So that when that eventually turns up, I'm not going to bother with it. But yeah, so the fact that Hitmonkey's coming back was a real surprise.
It was. I thought it was going to be one and done, but I did enjoy season 1. It's a good action series. There's nothing too deep about it. It's just a monkey, some guns, hitmen, and set piece fight moments, and it was fun for what it was. And as long as they do that for season 2, it'll be good. And out of those few Marvel shows that kind of came out of the tail end, it was my favorite of them. Like MODOK just was odd. It was a dumpster fire, to be honest. But
I didn't mind MODOK as I think I watched 2 episodes and like, oh, this is fun, and then I kind of really just I'm really bored of this now. Hellstrom I never finished.
Right, neither did I.
I don't think I even finished The Runaways. I don't think I even finished that one. There was that kind of feeling of just like, these are just dead. It's a bit like the DC. Well, there we are.
I know. I'm actually watching what's going on with James Gunn and the DC universe pretty closely. Not because I'm like super interested in them. But you know, maybe he can bring that back to things.
Yeah, there's a lot of chatter this week, and it's kind of interesting. They are doing a few series, which it's always that kind of thing. If I think like a good strong DC really will make Marvel better. And that's the way I always look at it. A good Marvel, that's what we want. We want some strong competition. If they're bringing their A game, that will push Marvel to be better. And I love Batman and Superman. It's it's like reboot or don't reboot. Don't do this all over the place.
Just give us a clear message. Is it? Are you starting from zero, or is this? It sounds like the Flash might introduce kind of the Flashpoint scenario where it's a soft reboot where we'll keep the things we like and get rid of things we won't, but we'll have to wait and see. I don't know if I'm going to see it in theater. I've been burned too many times by the movies, and I still consider Flash to be part of old DCU, regardless of what reboot or not. This is a pre-James Gunn thing.
Yeah, I won't. I'll wait till it's on Sky Cinema or something like that. I haven't seen Black Adam yet, and I wanted to see that.
I've heard so many conflicting things. Like some people I've talked to have absolutely loved it, and other people I've talked to have like, don't ever put this onto your system. I've never seen it. So
the second it's on Sky Cinema, I will be watching it. That's the way I look at it. Okay, so before we jump into what we've been watching and stuff, let's have a quick big thank you to our Patreon and YouTube channel members. Big thank you to your support. Thank you to Jonathan, DJ Frost, Top Ben. We've got Tim, Chuck, David, Malmoud, Raphael, Adam, Ricky, My VCR Still Works, Bina, Joshua, Martin. We also big hello and thank you to Babak. We've got Paul, Daniel, Elliot, Aero, Caleb, Red Mars Man, Cody, Jacob, Darren, Lauren, the Juice, and Andrew. Also, huge thank you for big support to Sarah. Thank you so much for your support over the last couple of years. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, you can become a member from as little as $2 a month. That means you can take part in the weekly Q&A. Also, if you've got questions during the week, pop them into the comments of the daily videos. I will more likely going to pick yours up, but I'm going to be picking up a few different comments on each of the daily videos and adding that to the end of each one. So that's kind of the plan moving forward. It's kind of one of those weird things of like the YouTube's kind of gone, you're either going to go short or long. And so I've kind of been doing a lot of experimenting over the last few months. So now I think I've got enough data now to kind of work out what's working. You got to keep changing. You got to keep changing. Right. Okay. So what have we been watching on Disney Plus recently? What have you been start watching?
For Disney Plus, it's basically been the Bad Batch. That's the only current series really coming out, other than a couple documentaries and things like that. We're definitely in a lull between things, and the fact that I consider Bad Batch to be a lull is actually probably a good sign for the health of Disney Plus, because a lull used to be we have literally nothing to watch, and Bad Batch is here. Having said that, I know season 2 has been much more engaging than season 1 has for me. I've liked the last several episodes of it. It's still not up there. It's still not at Clone Wars or Rebels quality, but both of those also started slow and eventually built up to it. And at least from my perspective, it is on the rise. It's doing much better. It's focusing on the actual Bad Batch rather than Cameo of the Week, which was season 1. Yeah, I think it's doing much better than it was before, and I'm starting to look forward to the episodes more than I was previously.
Yeah, see, I kind of feel like the exact opposite, because I watched a few when we got sent them, but I've been kind of watching weekly and stuff. And like this past week's episode, I was just like, I actually can't even remember what it was. That's how much impact it's had. This show just is just not clicking with me as anything exciting to watch. It's kind of hard, because it's not like there's anything wrong with it. It's just not like grabbing me at all. And I'm just keep watching it every week, and it's just not like, I don't know. It's just really strange. It's just like I don't know. It's a really odd show.
Actually, the most recent episode did kind of bother me a bit, which is it was the Jedi Wookiee
that
one. The where the little kid who was clearly a Padawan and so on, and it's not that particular character's fault, but I'm just kind of like, oh, another Jedi who survived the Purge, and another one that's wandering out there, because they just keep adding them on. Not that I wanted them to kill a little baby Wookiee there, or a teenager Wookiee, but it's like more and more Jedi. Luke was supposed to be the last one, and now there's a lot more. But that's a minor issue. That particular story, it was decent enough. It's got a lot of action in it, and it's pretty predictable. I think
I was going to say that next week is going to be a double episodes. That might shift up a bit, because sometimes that gives them a little bit more room to grow.
Right. I think the main thing with Bad Batch, and this has been a problem since the beginning, is I just don't click with the characters. There is no Captain Rex character. There is no Anakin or and none of them I'm particularly like, yes, this is the character that I'm here to watch every week, or ideally several of them. The one character I liked was Crosshair, and he turned traitor, and he barely shows up at all, though he has had one episode so far this season. But I'm just not connected with them the way I connected with characters in the Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah, it's a bit of, I'm not 100% on that. So I want to talk now about National Treasure: Edge of History. Did you carry on, or have you completely stopped on this one?
I stopped after like episode 2. Or
Don't bother. So this week was the penultimate episode. Big kind of like ending, and I saw a load of people like going, oh, "I didn't see this coming," and I'm like going, "I saw this coming in like in episode 1 or 2." You could tell, and it was just like, this show is just so disappointing. It's so. I think because I love that National Treasure of those first 2 films, are just like, this is not National Treasure. This is the CW goes treasure hunting, and it's like it's too much. It's like I don't like it's the it's just it's getting worse. I'm just like, this is just like no. This is just how you take a franchise and just do the cheapest, lamest version of it possible. I know some people are enjoying it. So in some way, it's not terrible. My wife did say I don't want to watch it anymore, so that's another one down on it. It's not like in Turner and Hooch kind of level of this is just dire. And I could see them putting this on like ABC. But it's like, you shouldn't have used the National Treasure branding on this. This should have been on its own. And it's in some ways it just weakens down that branding. If this is what can happen when you take a good brand and you do a cheap version of it. And yeah, I'm gonna watch the finale next week, but it's definitely not yeah, it just feels a little bit like, I don't know. It just hasn't got that feel of it. I still don't like the characters. I still like that kind of thing. Like, you know, if one or two of them end up turning on her, it's like, well, you could have seen that. You know, most of the stuff you can see coming a mile off. I mean, the whole thing with the FBI stuff, you knew that one of them was being, you know, was working for Billy. You could see it in the first episode with them trying to get rid of the woman FBI agent. You know, you could just see it coming. They were setting this all up. It wasn't a big shock. And then like getting them out of prison and stuff. It was just, I know they were trying to go for this big epic heist thing that they did in the movie, but it's like, it did not hit. And this, you know, it's just disappointing because I was really looking forward to this show. I went in like full, like, it's gonna be,
yeah. Well, even the preview we saw at D23 looked decent. So yeah, it was kind of like, you know, I'm not as big a fan of the movies as you were. I enjoyed them, but they were like, oh, I enjoyed them, and then I moved on. But even with that, I was looking forward to this series. I thought it was going to be fun, like you said, like a heist, maybe something Uncharted or Tomb Raider-y with a little bit of American history thrown in there, because you know that's what the series does, or the franchise does. And then it's just like, what is going on with this series? And that the chase, I think it was in the first episode where like she's just on a bus and the car apparently can't pull the bus over or something. And it's like she has no agency in anything. And it's like, this is ridiculous.
It's the fact that like there's one in these last couple of episodes, they literally went to Mexico, found somebody, and busted them out of prison. And it was like, oh, we'll bust them out of prison. And they like did it that afternoon. And it was just like, oh, you know, we're you know, 20-somethings from, you know, from America. We can work out how to get in and out of a prison and get somebody out. And it was just like, come on. I mean, you know, at least you could have done a little bit of planning or something. It was just like popping into the shop and like nicking a cream egg kind of thing. just like
I don't know. You at this point you are going to have to plan a major heist if you want to get eggs at the store. So maybe
it just seems, I don't know, this series has been a bit of a disappointment. So there's that one. Also, I completely forgot to mention the Mysterious Benedict Society has been cancelled after 2 seasons. What did you think of that news?
Obviously I'm disappointed. I was looking forward towards the hook they had at the end of season 2 for continuing stories. Obviously we can just read the books instead. I'm assuming that's in the books as well, but honestly not surprised at all. So we were kind of expecting this. Season 2 did not get much promotion. Nobody was talking about it. I think most people don't even know it exists. So I would love to have seen season 3. I did enjoy season 2 overall, though it did feel weaker than season 1. But can't say I'm surprised.
I wasn't surprised. This was definitely one of, like, I felt the second season didn't have that same bite that the first season had. I am thinking now that what these networks need to do, and not just Disney, but the Netflix especially should do this, is you film a finale of a season with an ending. With an ending where it ends. No cliffhangers, no setting it up. And you maybe film 2 endings, the cliffhanger one and the non-cliffhanger one. And if you decide before it airs that you've cancelled it, you air the one for the ending. And if it's got a cliffhanger, you only do that if you know it's coming back. I think, you know, like with Willow and all the rest of it, it's like they need to start planning for this instead of just it's like, if you're gonna do the cliffhanger, you need to be able to, or at least have the episode ready to wrap it up. So it's like with the mysterious one. If they hadn't have mentioned the sister, they could have just ended it. And I just feel like, you know, if they're getting into these short seasons, because that's what, you know, either commit to going, right, we're going to do 3 seasons of this. I mean, in essence, 3 seasons of these shows are only 1 traditional season of what they would have been under the normal US system. But if you're only doing 6 to 8 episodes, commit to a 3-episode arc. And if you're going to do it, commit to it and do it. If you want to cancel it or cut the budget, you know, it's that kind of weird thing of like, it's that odd thing, I think. And Netflix is getting a lot of problems from kind of, because there's no pilot season. So everything's just getting greenlit. And you know, because this past week, FX also cancelled Kindred. I hasn't even landed here in the UK. I think it might even end up like I don't even know if it'll arrive anymore. And it's like now, like if it does arrive, I won't ever watch it because it's like cancelled before it's it's dead on arrival, basically.
Yeah, the one key difference though that I would point out is that when we're talking about the cancellations with Disney Plus so far, it's been stuff that you can point at and definitely go, it's underperforming. It makes sense that they're going to cancel it, right?
Yeah.
It's not getting the viewership. It's not getting the buzz. What Netflix gets a lot of flack for is you have these insanely popular series, like what was it, The Dark or something like that? One of those recent ones, and they announced it's not getting renewed, but it was generating buzz. It was generating views. And people are getting invested in the show, and then no, it's not coming back. Sorry. And they've been doing this consistently with show after show after show, where people are actually getting invested in it. They're talking about it, and then it's gone. This would be more like if they end with a cliffhanger on Bad Batch season 2, and then like, oh, you know what, we know you really enjoyed it, but gone, or something along those lines. So far, Disney Plus has only canceled stuff that's underperforming. It's when they start going, well, millions of people love this show, but we're just not feeling it. Bye. That's when the flack really starts coming in.
Yeah, I think Netflix seems to have kind of got into this thing of getting a very bad reputation of people going, I'm not willing to try a new show because you're going to cancel it. And that is obviously this past week, Extraordinary season 2 production started here in the UK. And I saw quite a lot of people saying, oh, it's coming back. I'll watch it then. Because they've almost like Netflix is like training to not give these new shows a go because, oh, you're just going to cancel it. And like people, we're getting it. I mean, I think even Disney even tweeted out on the UK one, kind of making fun of the fact of it's okay, you can watch season 1 because we've got season 2 coming. And so they're even playing on the fact of like, this whole kind of cancellation and like these shows are coming back. It's a very odd way of doing it. But yeah, it's very interesting to see how all this comes in.
It's part of the danger of relying on algorithms too much, which sounds weird because part of my job is algorithm based and things like that. But Netflix had the algorithm. People watch
algorithm.
I know it's the worst, but they had the algorithm where people would watch. Where we're creating a new show, brought in more people than continuing an old show, right? And mathematically, up to a point, that's true. Until people realize that's what you're doing and don't and aren't willing to take the jump on new series because I'm going to get attached to it and then they're going to yank it out from me. So it worked for a while and now it's not, and people are aware of it, but they haven't changed their practice yet. And other companies need to make sure they don't adopt this practice because we as consumers are much more jaded about this than we used to be. And we are paying attention to whether or not shows are continuing. Like you were talking about Kindred. Why should you bother to watch it if you know it's not continuing at all? And it's not a one and done story.
Yeah. I mean, like Reboot that got cancelled this past week as well, which I thought was I thought that was a solid comedy. It wasn't amazing, but it was fine for what it was. It's being dropped. Apparently, they're trying to find another network. I can't see how another network is going to want to buy a cancelled show. Hardly any of them are doing this. 1 or 2 of them have done it in the past, but it's basically, these are like secondhand underwear at this point of like, do you want to buy it? No, it's a bit smelly. I'd rather buy this nice new shiny pair.
Well, the irony of that is what Netflix did used to do back when it was beginning.
Give us
like,
the pants.
not the pants so much, but and Amazon Prime did it as well, where they'd be like, ooh, this is a semi-popular show that Sci-Fi Channel or whatever isn't willing to create anymore, but it's already got a built-in base. We'll go ahead and grab it for a couple seasons and build up people's interest. I know The Expanse is obviously one of the bigger ones that Amazon picked up.
Yeah.
But they don't do that anymore either. What was that?
Lord of the Rings.
It hurts my soul. I'm not even like a huge Lord of the Rings fan, but man, Rings of Power was, I don't know what Rings of Power
I never finished it. I never got past episode 2. I never went back. That's how dull it was. And I've sat through the extended version of all 6 films.
Well, the original 3 extended versions are great. I wouldn't sit through the Hobbit extended versions, but the original three.
I've watched the Hobbit trilogy over that series, and I did. I've watched the Hobbit films a couple of times. It's just an odd one. I think we're at this weird thing now, and there's a potential writers' strike coming up that might put a bump in the road on all these shows, and there's a lot of talk that we might see much more cancellations coming up ahead of that because they're going to cost too much. And we're in that kind of, it feels like we're in cancellation season right now with them all trying to cut budgets. We've been seeing pretty much all the Disney Channel and National Geographic content is now being shared. It's kind of weird with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur is kind of like this weird, like it's Disney Channel and a Disney Plus original at the same time. It doesn't really kind of.
Well, it's weird from our perspective because obviously we're Disney Plus focused and we don't really handle stuff on Disney Channel. But I think it does make sense for them because they've seen a lot of the Marvel shows maybe underperforming towards expectations. That thing came out this past week where The Boys over on Amazon outperformed all of the Marvel shows. So they might be looking at it as we can have the expanded audience and more people will be aware of it if it's on both Disney Channel and Disney Plus.
Yeah, I have got zero. I think it makes perfect sense to put shows on both at the same time. I totally do. Like recently, I've noticed Disney's Magic of Animal Kingdom is on National Geographic, not on the channel yet. Supernatural is now showing up on National Geographic over here. I think it's just a term of like calling it an original on Disney Plus and it being on linear at the same time is like it's
I would agree
really
with that.
Technically, it's not. But I'm happy with them release, and I think we're going to see more of this. But yeah, on that note, guys, thank you very much for watching. Big thank you to everyone for joining in. Again, check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com. Like, follow, and subscribe. And on that note, guys, see you soon. Later. Thank you very much for watching this video. Make sure you go check us out over at whatsondisneyplus.com. Like, follow, and subscribe. Also, a huge thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and also on our YouTube channel memberships. And I shall see you guys in another video. Laters.